Berlin is one of those cities where history isn't behind glass. It's right under your feet. Today I'm exploring what's left of the Berlin Wall, and then we're heading to Checkpoint Charlie to compare what it was during the Cold War to what it is now. From 1961 to 1989, the Berlin Wall split the city of Berlin. The eastern side, which was controlled by the Soviet Union, is the one who put up the wall. What started as barbed wire turned into a heavily fortified border system. Families were separated, everyday life got redefined, and the city became the symbol of a divided world. Now, typically, there were actually two barriers with a restricted zone between them. Guards had clear sightlines, and the goal was brutal: prevent anyone from crossing from east to west. How did the wall fall? Well, in 1989, pressure built up really fast. Protests grew in East Germany, the wider Eastern Bloc was changing, and people were pushing very hard for freedom of movement. Then, on November 9th, an East German official announced new travel rules. People crossed, they celebrated, climbed the wall, literally rewriting the city's story in a single night. And after all that, the pieces came down fast. Not just physically, but psychologically. Some of the remaining pieces of the wall are preserved as memorials. Some became canvases for art, and some, honestly, are just fragments that survived because the city chose not to erase everything.
This is an actual section of the Berlin Wall from before it was taken down, and there's chunks of it still existing here and around the city, but for the most part it's gone, and the only thing that remains from the actual wall itself is a line in the street made out of some cobblestone.
This is the part that gets me. You can still see the scale, the texture, how physical the division was. It's one thing to read about it, but standing here, it just clicks. Okay, wall fragments hit you in the emotions, but Checkpoint Charlie hits you in the imagination, because it was the stage for so many Cold War standoffs. This was the best known crossing point between the American sector in West Berlin and the Soviet-controlled section in East Berlin, especially for foreigners, diplomats, and allied personnel who had to move between the two places. When it was operational, this place was tense. There were strict controls, inspections, and constant surveillance. One of the most famous moments? In 1961, Americans and Soviet tanks faced off not too far from this exact spot. The world watched, holding its breath. Imagine this street nearly empty. Imagine the silence being louder than the crowd. And imagine the stakes being global. But an awful lot has changed. And you can probably tell immediately it's busy, it's touristy, it's almost theatrical.
Right over my shoulder you can see the sort of touristy, take a picture, Checkpoint Charlie part. It symbolizes the spot where people came in and out.
Almost comically, this is not the real checkpoint. The real checkpoint was actually removed from this spot and put in a museum also located in Berlin many years later. Today, what you're seeing is more like a symbolic recreation of the checkpoint than the original operational site. The vibe is completely different. And that raises a tricky question. Does turning history into a photo spot cheapen it? Or does it keep the story alive? Maybe it's a little bit of both. What matters is remembering why this place mattered. Because movement was controlled. Because crossing a street could mean risking your freedom or life. Seeing what's left of the Berlin Wall reminds you how recent this history really is. And standing at Checkpoint Charlie shows how a place can transform from a flashpoint of global tension into a landmark where people come to understand what it all meant. If you liked exploring Berlin with me, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's a historic site that you visited and felt completely different in person than it did in the textbooks? I'd love to hear about it.